Kitco Mining special coverage of the Mines and Money Miami is brought to you by Snowline Gold.
The mining sector is a picture of extremes. In recent weeks, we've seen mega mergers in the gold mining space, but the gold index, the GDX, Nicole, is nearing a 52-week low. Luckily, we have you. You're one of the best macro resource modelers in the business. Dr. Nicole Adshead-Bell, welcome to Kitco.
Thank you very much for having me, Michael. I don't know about that. I try.
We appreciate the help. We're going to talk about where we are right now in a minute. But again, you have a unique perspective in terms of looking at mining, and you use something called like a mining clock. What is that? Why do you use that? And what's the model?
The mining clock isn't my idea. It's Line Selection Group, and I saw it in a conference and have adapted, I suppose, to how I look at the universe. And what it is a mechanism to allow one to step back and go, where are we in the cycle? And so there's very specific events that occur throughout any commodity cycle. And I think looking at that can give you a sense of objectivity in trying to understand how to invest, where to invest. Should I be putting money into the sector? Should I be taking it out? And so I use the mining clock for that reason. And really it circles back. This is not my quote, but it's a brilliant one. And it's the four most dangerous words in the English language are this time it's different. It's never different. And so we're destined to replicate the same mistakes and the same successes. And understanding that, I think, can allow you to better invest. So that's how I look at the world.
Okay, well, help us out to where we are. Maybe you could go back maybe a couple of months where we just had that awful 2022.
We did have an awful 2022, unless you're in lithium or coal.
Yeah.
Coal performed exceptionally well.
We're going to talk a little bit about transition metals in a minute, but yeah, take us to 2022 and where we've got to now.
Sure. 2022, I think whenever the whole sector is full of pessimism, that's always a very good time to be looking. In fact, I think it's easier to invest from my perspective when the market is in a downturn. Maybe there's a little bit more objectivity. And when things are moving upwards rapidly, sometimes you can be guilty of jumping on the bandwagon because when share prices are going up, we all feel very good about that. So I thought last year was an interesting year. What we're seeing now is classic, I think, where we're in the cycle. So we're starting to see low risk M&A again. So potential for another mega merger. And what does that mean with Newmont's offer for Newcrest? So what we tend to see in, I think, in this part of the cycle is these companies have a growth issue. We have paucity, whatever commodity that you look at, there's been a paucity of discoveries. Timelines to develop new mines are getting longer. The average timeline now from discovery to production is in excess of 15 years. So how do you maintain your production profile as a gold company, let alone grow it? And for the large companies, it's very, very difficult to do. And really the only way that you can do that is through substantial M&A. So we're seeing Newmont take over Newcrest, well, make an offer to take over Newcrest. And normally when that happens is I think larger companies, their boards will start having a conversation. Okay, Newmont is doing this. What are we doing to support our own growth profile and ensure that we're still in the mix? And so it generally is a tipping point for people to start looking at M&A. Obviously, the developers are still a very unloved group in gold, and not just in gold, but in other commodities. And the developers are the ones that are really doing the R&D engine of our business. So we're in that low-risk M&A phase, and ultimately when the cycle matures and prices increase and people start getting worried about growth again is when the developer group starts to get the love. We're not there yet.
So it's generally positive right now. It's like where we're pointed right now, and with the M&A pictures that we've seen happen as well too, that is a bullish sign.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, the gold prices come off, the equities have underperformed, but we're still in a strong gold price environment. On the flip side of that, we're dealing with inflationary pressures, and these inflationary pressures are not just obviously in gold, they're across the sector in general, and not just mining, in basically every sector.
Mm-hmm. Turning from precious metals to industrial metals, we're having a conversation off camera. You've become a big copper fan. Could you tell us why you're a copper fan?
Sure. Yes, I've drunk the Kool-Aid on copper, absolutely. There's a lot of focus, obviously, on critical minerals, and every government around the world is identifying a critical mineral list. And there's some that have received a lot of attention, with lithium being up more than 9 times over the last 2 years, and then the subsequent equity performance and M&A activity, and maybe arguably some on the subject of the mining clock, some toppy signs. When you start seeing non-specialists take big positions in companies companies such as the GM announcement with Lithium Americas and Thacker Plus, that can be a sign of maybe being closer to the top than the bottom. That's a very overtly bullish sign. For me, copper is the critical metal. It's the foundation of the global move to electrification. And if you look at anybody's supply-demand charts going forward, the supply starts to have a dramatic decline based on existing production today and the paucity of new committed supply from 2025. So you're in this perfect position where big supply drop-off, an inelastic response to price pressures. And it shocks me that the world isn't talking about this more. So, for example, Glencore's CEO came out and said last year that they are not bringing any more copper supply on until the market is screaming for it. And the market will be screaming for it, and that will be expressed in incentive price movements. And so what you're seeing now is an incredible reluctance for anybody to make material investments in new copper production. So that's from the majors and down through to the developers. So it's a very scary picture in some ways in terms of the lack of security of supply. And so the only way supply will increase, as we know, the price of the underlying commodity has to increase. And I'm chairman of a copper company that's got a development asset in Chile called Hot Chili. And I suppose I've been spending a lot of time just thinking structurally about how do you as a junior company, how do you navigate this world where incentive pricing needs to go up and the market has yet to realise that that needs to occur.
Oh, where are you, what do you think is screaming more in the copper space? Is it the drop off in supply, or do you think it's the increase in demand, Nicole?
Both. I mean, if you look at, and these are not coming from mining companies, but if you look at the demand picture with the move to net zero and what that means for the growth in EV vehicles. So don't forget, we all talk about lithium with respect to batteries, but an EV vehicle requires 3 to 4 the times amount of copper than an ICE vehicle. So if you believe that EV vehicles and the demand for those is going to escalate material and increases copper demand, more copper is used in renewables than it is in the more traditional forms of power generation. So all of this global signalling towards moving to net zero is resulting in an escalation of demand. Now you can make a choice as to how much that demand will fluctuate. So you have a demand picture that's very compelling, and it's offset by a supply picture that's very compelling. So how do we incentivize new supply? Price has to come up.
Let's turn to critical metals and Brazil. You have some experience working in Brazil with the company Bravo Mining. There's been a number of governments that have put together critical metal strategies, what's happening in Canada, the Inflation Reduction Act, of course, in the US as well. But you said that something unique is happening in Brazil. They're really providing a good incentive framework. What's happening there?
Sure. So as you said, every government has come out and said we are aware that critical minerals and security of supply of critical minerals is an issue. But Brazil was one of the first movers in that and put their money where their mouth is. So they implemented a critical minerals policy. And what that meant is those projects that identified as having critical minerals, and that includes iron, that includes copper, that includes PGMs, luckily for Bravo, and a number of other key commodities, is they will be eligible for a streamlined permitting process. So they've acknowledged that permitting is one of the biggest holdups that we're seeing globally. Now, unlike the US, with the recent news out of the US, where on the one hand the government is saying we're aware that critical minerals and we want security of supply, and then on the other hand the federal government has intervened in terms of halting bringing on new copper production. So with the change in land status for Twin Metals, so Antofagasta's project, they've spent in excess of $450 million. And of course, what's going on with Northern Dynasty and Pebble. And so you see governments reacting. I think everybody acknowledges that security of supply of critical minerals is an issue, but then how are they manifesting in terms of trying to reduce that risk is very, very different from country to country. And I think it's interesting because investors tend to say, well, North America is a safer jurisdiction to invest, much safer than other countries. And that's not necessarily the case. I would argue that risk manifests itself in very, very different ways. And if you look at Brazil, Brazil's a fascinating country because it's predominantly renewable energy, so lower carbon footprint. Almost any commodity that you can think of is a world-class resource. And I think a government acknowledgement that there's the potential for them to become a mining superpower if they step up to the plate. So it'll be interesting to see how Brazil navigates this environment that we're in over the next decade.
Bring us up to date with Bravo Mining. Why did you decide to become involved with it?
Bravo. Well, I have a huge soft spot for Brazil and have been going there for many, many years. And the chairman and CEO and the founder of Bravo, who I'd met in a former career, had reached out to me. He ran a law firm in the country and had managed to get a project that is, I think, a potential to be a tier one asset, and reached out to me because he wanted it to be listed in Canada and wanted me to be involved as a founding director and lead director. And so I have a lot of experience in the capital market side of things. So we very rapidly took that company public. We raised a lot of money in very, very difficult environment, if you all remember July last year. So it's been a great success story and it's getting a lot of traction. So it's PGMs, and so obviously the most PGMs come out of Russia, and there's issues with Russia and South Africa. And then more recently, I think increased the potential for nickel because we've intersected some massive nickel, and that's getting a lot of attention. So it's one of those rare stories that's very, very well situated locationally, low economic hurdle, huge amount of infrastructure in the Carajás, and then a lot of exciting drill results coming out of the project. It had a historic resource from Vale that was drilled back in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And really our job is to understand how big this system is with a pretty aggressive drill program that's ongoing, and also better investigate the potential for nickel. So it's been a very exciting story and has done very, very well. And as you said, in a tough environment, knock on wood, the share price has been doing exceptionally well.
Nicole, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for having me, Michael.
She's Dr. Nicole Adshead-Bell. My name is Michael McCrae with Kitco Mining here at Mines and Money, Miami.
Kitco Mining, special coverage of the Mines and Money Miami, is brought to you by Snowline Gold.